Revelation chapter 20, if you want to be there. Everyone is quickly waking up to the spiritual truth that without God's intervention, things don't get better. They only get worse. Without God's intervention, everything decays. Without God's intervention, our world is dying. Now, often we don't notice it. When you look at the pollution of our world, when you hear, as we did this week, that 10% or 866 species of the world's trees are going to go extinct this decade. 10% in 10 years? That's terrible. When you look at the pollution, the oceans are depleted. The fishermen, Bonnie and I were just speaking, we were in Boston, we were watching those fishing boats go out. They have to go out further and further and further because the fish have been so depleted, so lessened. When the birds of Mexico City fall from the smoke-laced skies in death, when industrial waste have cast a blanket of death across so many farms and forests of our world, God says, I have good news. Paradise is coming. Doesn't look like it, but it is. Where we are this hour, we're covering 2 of the 7 wonderful, clear events. We're looking at Christ's earthly millennial rule. By the way, the word millennium is not in the Bible, at least not in the Greek. It's in the Vulgate, which is the Latin, and that's where it comes from. The word in the Greek New Testament is the word thousand, and this mille is thousand, and annum or annium is years. So you might have a friend from a covenant Reformed background or Roman Catholic or something like that say, millennium's not in the Bible, and you smile and say, oh, that's true, neither is rapture. Oh, you'll set them off. You know, that kind of jolts them. They go, oh, because they've heard that, and that's a way to show Christianity has all these errors. You say, no. The word is, the Greek word, which has to do with 1,000, but it's been translated in the Roman Catholic Bible to millennium, and so we use that term, but you're right. But it does say 1,000 years, 6 times in this chapter. And so Jesus has promised in 1/4 of the Old Testament, and he has repeated that promise 6 times in this chapter, that he's going to literally stand back on earth after his second coming. We covered yesterday, chapter 19. In chapter 20, he's going to stand on the earth and begin his promised earthly rule. And that, of course, is going to be a big event because when Christ's second coming occurs, what we covered yesterday was chapter 19, but if we would have covered all the second coming passages in the Old Testament, you would see a lot of stuff happens. One thing that happens is when Jesus' feet hit the very top of the Mount of Olives, it splits the Mount of Olives. It's an earthquake, and it splits it so water flows from there to the Dead Sea to the Mediterranean. There are huge topography changes on earth. You already remember yesterday what we read in chapter 19 is the mountains start flattening. The islands start sinking. I mean, all these things are happening. It's a beginning of the run-up to this event. So the first thing we're going to look at this hour, the first half of it, is Christ's 1,000-year rule, the millennium. The second half are the rebels. Guess what God proves? A perfect environment does not produce perfect people. When I was younger than you guys are, there was a president in the United States called LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson. He was a Texan. He was he presided over the horrors of the Vietnam War and all that time in history. But his domestic, as a U.S. president, his domestic agenda, his global agenda was Vietnam, but fighting communism. But his domestic agenda was the Great Society. He was a wonderfully powerful politician. And he sold this idea of urban renewal. Wow. If St. Louis used to be the 5th largest city in America. Why is that? Because even when Jesus is ruling the whole world, almost everyone rejects him. So a perfect environment does not produce perfect people. That's why I would encourage all of you. There are a few of you that will be involved in politics, and that's wonderful. Become a lawyer, study jurisprudence and get involved in politics and serve the country. But don't ever think that you will be able to Christianize any part of this country by legislation. Jesus can't even do it. You understand that? What he does is, during the millennium, if you won't obey the rules, he said you will die. Capital punishment. That's the only way you Christianize or theocratize a society, is the way John Calvin did. You ever hear of John Calvin? If you disagreed with him theologically, he burned you at the stake. Now that's how you get it done. That's not what God called Christians to do. And so why waste your life trying to bring in a perfect society? So the millennium is a very instructive part of the Bible.